Cannes is all about reconnecting with major thought leaders in our industry, and I can't think of anyone better than Richard Edelman. In terms of people I respect as a human, a friend, and one of the most prescient, visionary, and brave leaders I've worked with, Richard is top of the list. Literally everyone in our industry knows his name and the impact he has in our world. And so for the next few minutes, I am selfishly excited to pick his brain about what he's seeing and what lies ahead, and I'm going to let you all in on that conversation with him. So let's get started. Welcome, Richard. Great to see you in Cannes.
As always.
Awesome. All right, so I want to start with just context, big picture. We're obviously operating in a world where we expect the economy to be challenging going forward. We're seeing more polarization than we've ever seen before. And we're seeing new cultures come into the workforce that are totally changing expectations and the way that we work. So I'm curious, you coming to Cannes, how are you thinking about the world that we're operating in, and what do you want marketing professionals to think about, know, and do in this world?
The context, Mel, is that we have unprecedented level of fears. It's inflation, it's global conflict, it's sustainability, environment, and we also have brands now being asked to do things that they hadn't done before. You know, help me fix the world. Brands have superpowers. So I want CMOs to think laterally about what is expected. At the same time, with polarization, you've seen brands get really hurt by being, frankly, pantomime, characterized as woke. And so this anti-woke backlash is very significant. And we're in the political silly season in the U.S. now, get to the election. So you see volatility that we haven't observed before. So if you're a smart brand, you're looking for credible places to tell your story, but you're also looking to be active, to act as opposed to just talk, because the consumer is looking for brands that stand up and speak up for him or her.
So you're alluding to it, but you've made the Edelman name synonymous with trust. And I was recently reading a post you did on LinkedIn on some thought leadership, and you talked about my vision of a better marketing relies on trust. And so I'm curious, share a bit more about how you educate and talk to marketing and comms leaders about trust.
So for us, trust drives growth, but action enables trust. And so trust is in four parts. It's ability, dependability, integrity, and purpose. And if you look at the component parts, what you need to be able to say is, I've actually done something tangible. It's no longer enough to just talk and present your case in fun. 3/4 of people, Mel, say, I need safety and security today. Only 1/4 say they need fun. So that's the mindset of the consumer.
We say at LinkedIn, trust is consistency over time. Yeah. So another thing is your actions have to be really consistent over time. So you and I talked about the fact that a lot of our revered institutions, the trust in them has fallen. And we see this in the trust barometer time over time. So it really has fallen onto companies. And you alluded to this in your first answer. But what role do marketing and communication specifically play in helping companies navigate this time in this space where consumers and buyers are expecting so much from companies?
I think one of the biggest changes in the trust barometer over the 20 plus years is the crisis of trust in media. And LinkedIn's a shining star in this, in contrast, because the job of brands is partly to inform the public so that they can make qualified choices. And you know, if you actually have thought bubbles, right and left, you're looking for good information. Interestingly, a company's newsletter is now the most credible source of information, which is pretty shocking. You know, you and I started long enough in the business, you remember that being kind of the trivial part of life. But no, in the pandemic, it has surged in being the choice. Yeah. So, in fact, I must say that, you know, to me, to put our clients on LinkedIn, especially for our B2B practice, which is our fastest growing practice at the firm, is an urgent priority and a preferred priority because it actually reaches the target audience of executives.
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't ask you to say any of that. I'd love to hear about your experience with newsletters, and you're not alone. We're actually seeing the interest in newsletters on LinkedIn really spike. I think we have more than 90,000 newsletters now, more than 300 million subscribers. Wall Street Journal, Richard Branson's, Alicia Ward's. It's been really fun to watch for all the reasons that you talked about. Can you share a bit more about your experience building a newsletter? I imagine that people listening are thinking about newsletters or have newsletters and are always looking for better ways and how they should think about applying to their newsletters.
A smart company is putting quality information up on a constant basis. It has to be global. It has to be fact-based. It needs to have links to third parties so that you can actually check out for further information. And it also needs to be a way in which I can respond and say, I have questions, and be iterative.
Yeah, those are great pieces of advice. So let's dive a little bit into B2B right now. So when you and I met a few weeks ago, you talked about, I think B2B is one of your fastest growing practices. We just put out a B2B benchmark report, and I was actually really surprised to see how much bullishness there is in the B2B space. So B2B leaders saying that they expect their budgets to go up next year, and more than 50% were up this year. So what's happening in B2B? How are you thinking about the opportunity and the bullishness in the space?
So the obvious is industrial, and that's sort of where we started, selling wind turbines and things like this. But the newer areas for us are in food. Food service is a massive opportunity for us, because if you think about, out of home, fast food and schools and all this. Also, we find tech is important. Health is a new area for us in pharma. So again, we are looking this quite expansively, and I think it's about a $40 million business for us. We think it can be a $100 million business for us in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's definitely a B2B buzz at Cannes. I think it started last year, and I think the momentum has just picked up as far as I can tell. So,
Adweek, I saw this journalist yesterday who said, we're switching our coverage to B2B. Can you imagine? That's great.
Yeah.
That sells everything.
No, we're definitely seeing growth. It was interesting. I'm also seeing hiring pick up as I look at the data with marketing jobs in B2B. So it definitely feels like there's something there that may help pull us out of this economic time. So it's fun to look at. Well, we're at Cannes, which is the Creativity Festival, and I remember several years ago when you took Edelman deep into the creative exploration. You were, I think, very much ahead of the industry in that respect. So how are you thinking about B2B creative specifically? What are you seeing? What's interesting at this time?
So the first point is we decided 10 years ago that we were going to do our own creative, and that was a little bit of a throw. I came here for the first time 9 years ago, and I wondered, do I really fit here? But what's happening, Mel, is that the world's moved towards us because the brands need us because of geopolitics and issues around, diversity and sustainability and all these things that make it complex in the purchase funnel. And I even think that there's a real question about whether the purchase funnel in a linear way still exists. And what I love about creative that works well is it forges relationships. You could argue that purchase is only the beginning, that in fact, if you are smart, and which is why, again, we used your platform, you actually make purchase just the beginning, and then you have advocacy and engagement and continued kind of working with the customer, because you can get repeat purchase only if the brand feels as if it's really engaged. So it's attraction and engagement. We're actually introducing a thing called the trust loop, because in fact the purchase funnel is a one-way and ends with purchase, but that's just, again, the start.
I love that, and I would add to that, as more and more buyers are millennials, so we're seeing sort of a generational shift in the workplace as millennials take more and more leadership roles and become more and more the buyers. They're digital natives. So to your point, they're doing their research, they're doing all of their learning, and they want to do their transaction digitally. And so that I love that concept of a loop works even more powerfully when that's the context.
But 3/4 of buyers actually go back and do more research about a brand once they've bought it the first time, which is kind of stunning. Also, the Gen Z have much higher expectations of company behavior and brands. And they're only going to buy if they believe in what the brand's doing. And they want the brand to stand up and speak for them. So the pressure is coming from the consumer side and the employees who are values driven. So it's like a pincer movement pushing brands to be up there and out. But I would say to CMOs, careful the issues. I think the areas where you're safe are sustainability, diversity and inclusion, upskilling, which I think is key for LinkedIn,
Right.
also even on geopolitics. But areas in which there is a political dimension, careful. Keep business and politics separate. As a CEO, you can speak to your people about, a Supreme Court decision or things like this, but to become a public advocate or to have a brand make a big campaign, you have to stay in your swim lane. You have to be very careful that it's consistent with what your brand knows about.
Yeah, again, back to consistency over time. We're very, at LinkedIn, we've experienced this for years, and we're very disciplined in following a set of principles to make sure that we are driven by our vision, our values, and the role we can play in the world. And
but the thing I love about what you're doing with your brand is you meet the sort of three dimensions of what builds trust. You have to be competent, you have to be ethical, but you also have to be relevant. And relevance depends on being of the moment, but also being, as you say, in the long run there, and consistently accurate.
I love that. And I would add a fourth dimension, which is empathetic. I think people have to believe you actually care about them and their success. All right, so last question. We're at Cannes. I think we touched on most of the big conversations I've heard. The only other conversation that's happening in the water is technology, AI, the role of AI. So I couldn't leave a conversation with you without asking about how you're thinking about AI, what your clients are asking you, what you're advising companies.
So I'm looking at it two ways. One is, is it an efficiency tool? Is it a means of, getting our product up and out quicker? But I'm also looking at the other side of this, Mel, because I actually think that disinformation is actually going to cripple the marketplace. And so we need to be very quick in responding to fake news and falsehood. And we also need to fill the field in a way with quality facts such that whatever is produced through AI is actually true.
Accurate.
Because accuracy is everything. Trust depends on people getting good facts.
Well, I imagine this is a fascinating time because of the role that you all have carved out in trust. And so I guess in closing, I'll thank you on behalf of the industry, because I agree with you. Like, as we enter this world, trust is more important than ever. So navigating how we enter a world of AI and do it in a trustful way is the end goal, and is going to be so important to how we navigate going forward. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you.